Welcome to the Healthusiasm podcast, a panel discussion on behaviors, innovation, and trends in health and self-care. My name is Christophe Choquet. I'm the global keynote speaker on the future of health and self-care business, and I'm also the author of the book called Healthusiasm. Now, if you're new to the show, you might wonder what Healthusiasm is all about. Well, Healthusiasm is the aspiration that we all have to be healthy and happy. And as a result of this, every company or organization is now more than ever focused on making their customers healthier and happier. And so every month I discuss with a panel of experts the positive changes that are shaping our health and happiness. For this discussion, we have two of your beloved experts in the panel. We have from London, customer experience and research expert Krupa Sutar.
Hi, everyone.
And we also have from Belgium, human experience expert Mo Zouina.
Hi there.
This means that today we are missing Aditi Joshi, our medical expert in digital health. But our own digital health connector, Aline Noizet, who also couldn't make it today, has brought me into contact with a similar subject matter expert, if I may call it that way. She introduced us in Finland, where we both spoke at the Radical Health Festival earlier this year. And we then later met again on the stage in the south of France, where we were both again speakers at Université de la e-Santé. I gotta say, I'm super happy to have this man on the show. First of all, he's a super great guy with an extremely large track record and a lot of experience. First of all, he worked for almost 20 years as a general practitioner. And when he quit his practice, he led clinicians and product teams at the famous AI healthcare chatbot called Babylon. Today, he works as a digital health specialist and clinical product manager for a ton of digital health clients. And as a thought leader in the space, he has spoken on stages around the world and has even been invited by the NHS and parliamentary groups to share his thoughts on digital and AI in healthcare. But most of all, this man is an accelerator for digital health on his own, trying to have the yes mentality to get things done in digital health, something we desperately need in healthcare, but also something which shows a lot of healthusiasm, of course. Welcome, my dear friend, Dr. Keith Grimes.
Well, amazing intro. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Or as they say in Aberdeen, which is where I'm from, fit like Aberdeen.
I'm not quite sure if I understood that correctly, or fully at least. Anyways, together and today we will amplify the healthusiasm that we see in articles and new business ventures, or simply even in the world around us. This is the second episode of the second season. And in this show, the panel will discuss the popularity of the vagus nerve, and whether or not voice technology in healthcare is something, nothing, or everything. But first, some healthusiasms, some positive changes that will impact your health and happiness, and that the Healthusiasm panel wants to share with you and inspire you with. Let's go first to you, Keith. What healthusiasm did you see recently?
So, starting in Scotland, which is where I'm from, although not where I live right now, the healthusiasm that I've seen this week is a kind of combination of things. First of which is that Scotland, formerly and probably still currently known as the sick man of Europe, has recorded for the first time in 5 years a reduction in accidental deaths from drug overdoses, drug deaths. Now, why is this important? Well, Scotland has traditionally had some real problems with health, often associated with deprivation, and drug deaths in particular have been bad. Scotland leads Europe in this regard. And if you look at the numbers, there's a 1.8 per 100,000 population accidental drug deaths in Europe. In Scotland, it's closer to 25 per 100,000. Very, very much higher, 3 times higher than the UK average as well. So a real problem. And in fact, it's grown an awful lot since 2000. So back in 2001, the Scottish government set up the National Mission on Drugs Plan with an aim to reduce this by building much more support services, which is interesting because this doubles down on public health measures. Public health having celebrated its 175th anniversary just yesterday. So it brings a couple of things together. Now, what's interesting is that the numbers have reduced. They've managed to save, I think I've got 279 lives or a reduction, which is really quite substantial. And they're wanting to push further, so much so that they wanted to pursue things like more radical changes, decriminalization, shooting galleries, that kind of thing. But the trouble for Scotland is that Scotland is part of the United Kingdom, and this particular part of policy is held by central government, and the UK government has a very strong stance against such measures. So with the enthusiasm of things actually improving, We're also seeing something pushed back, which is that they don't want to put in some of these places. And of course, around the world, decriminalization, other measures have actually shown some real positive effects. So what else can I dig out that's in a healthusiasm for this? Well, in typical fashion, the government has decided to invest heavily, in this case, £5 million over the next few years, in innovations to try and reduce drug deaths. And so that's quite an interesting area. Now, you roll your eyes a little bit when they start talking about using drones to deliver naloxone to help remove people from having overdoses. But there's actually some very interesting things inside this, including novel treatments like patches to put on the skin, tablets to put by the gum so people can receive it easily, but also AI and wearables to be able to detect when a person is having an overdose and automatically call for help. So it's a kind of a mixed picture, but I am very happy to see my country starting to turn the tide against the deaths in drug overdoses.
Lovely. And to make a great segue here, turning the tide by using innovations and turning the tide for the numbers of drug deaths that you have in Scotland by using innovations. Maybe we can use innovations through turning the tide on aging. The SpaceX astronauts were launched just last week, the 25th of August, on a 6-month research expeditions to improve healthcare options on Earth. They'll do a lot of studies, but one of the studies that is particularly interesting is reversing the aging of our immune system. And so what they try to do is, I won't go into the technical details here now, but what they try to do is try to understand the relation between aging and the faster pace of aging that we actually have in space. Because if we are in space, the physiological changes resembles one of when we age at a faster pace. Let's put it that way. And this is not the first time that SpaceX is doing this. They've already done it a couple of times. I think last year as well, they did something related to the gut microbiomes. And there's a lot of initiatives at that level going into space to actually trying to understand how we can improve health on Earth. I actually wrote a newsletter about it. You can go and discover it on Healthusiasm.com. But there's even, did you know, Keith, that in the NHS, there's a joint venture between the NHS and the UK Space Agency, specifically for that purpose?
Oh, I didn't know that, although I do actually know Paul Bates, who's the chief executive of the UK Space Agency, who's a lovely guy, and he is a very enthusiastic person. So I'm not surprised that they're looking into that. What a great double act.
Great. So SpaceX involved in something related to reversing aging. From one wealthy person to another, Mo, and I'm not talking about you, but probably you're in Healthusiasm.
You can talk about me, but I enjoy a different type of richness for now. That's my way of saying I'm poor.
Oh,
anyway, yeah, I think it's a human story, once again, driven by passion and a man on a mission. His name is Reed Jobs. Not a lot of people we know are named Jobs. And yes, he is the son of Apple's co-founder Steve Jobs and his philanthropist mom, Laureen Powell Jobs. Reed is the only child out of that marriage, and he's stepping into the limelight today with his brand new venture called Yosemite. And those who might be Mac geek might recognize that name, Yosemite. Yosemite just closed its first fund round with a whopping $200 million. And on the table are some pretty impressive names, MIT, Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, and John Doerr. And now what makes this news so compelling is, well, Reed is a man on a mission. His personal experience drives him after his father's battle with pancreatic cancer, in which he lost in 2011. Reed changed course. He left his medical studies to explore history, earned a master's degree, and eventually he joined his mother's philanthropic organizations called the Emerson Collective, playing a crucial role in speeding up cancer research. And it's an extension of Reed's mission. The venture combines business and philanthropy. They fund innovative science through a donor-advised funds, and the goal is to accelerate research, turn breakthrough into a real-world solution, and share the rewards of everyone's benefit. So, yes, we have an enthusiasm here, freeing more means, resources, and focus on cancer research. Especially, it's a story of passion and a man on a mission which uses his wealth for good and intelligently.
Lovely. Passion and a human story, those are the words that I heard. I try to make a link here to my next Healthusiasm, which is about private members only clubs. It's very often people there, they have some sort of passion if they get together. And it's often related to human stories that they try to find themselves together. At least that's what I think. But you might remember those organizations from movies. That's where the old man smokes cigars. drink whiskeys. That's a very masculine environment very often in movies. It has its origins in aristocratic circles, probably already in the 1800s something. But why do I bring this up? And why do I refer to the human story or the passion? Is because those private member clubs are not anymore about smoking cigars or drinking whiskey only, or just trying to get your network or having connections with your network as much as possible. There's two evolutions, actually. One is there's more and more private member clubs. They're on the rise. And the reason is that since COVID, what we know is that we're looking for a connection. We're looking to meet people, actually. This is some of the things that we're seeing. That's why these private members only clubs there are on the rise. But there's a second evolution. And the second one has to do with health, of course. And that is more and more of these private members only clubs, they're turning into health conscious clubs, or they're even turning into child friendly or family friendly clubs, which was not the case 200 years ago. And so how did it change? They have next to the saloon and the co-working space and the bar and the restaurant, they now have gyms, fitness classes, massages, beauty treatments, physiotherapy, dermatology, well, all those kind of things. And you see them pop them up in London, you see them pop them up in Singapore, New York, pretty much in every big city. And it's pretty interesting in a way, because first of all, it was mostly about, building your network, having your network, meeting people. And now they're moving into the co-working, into the exercising. And in a similar fashion, what we see is that fitness centers are doing the opposite thing. Fitness centers used to be only about exercising, and they're moving more into like private members only clubs where people meet, where there's also childcare. Same goes for co-working spaces. Co-working spaces are becoming places where you can work out and where you can meet people, where there's childcare even. So all of these kind of clubs and get-together places are really becoming health beacons, if you will, where people can not only meet, not only work or exercise, but definitely work on their health as well. Krupa, up to you. What's your healthusiasm this month?
So mine's a really lovely article that I came across, and it was reported in August. And it's around a womb transplant. So basically over 100 womb transplants have taken place worldwide, and over 50 babies have been born. And last month it was reported that England's first ever womb transplant took place earlier this year. And the actual transplant was funded by Womb Transplant UK. And all the surgeons and doctors and nurses involved donated their time for free. So it was two sisters who were involved here. The older had completed her family and already had 2 children, and decided to donate her womb to her younger sister. So her younger sister was born with a condition where the uterus is absent or underdeveloped, but she had functioning ovaries. So this condition is known as type 1 MRKH. And her husband had already been through IVF, and they had already banked a number of embryos. And within 2 weeks of the surgery, what the surgeons had reported was that the recipient had already begun to have menstrual cycles. And so what they're hoping to do now is, now that the transplant has taken place, she's having menstrual cycles, although she's on a huge amount of immune suppressants, they're hoping very soon to begin transferring the embryos so that hopefully she will have a successful outcome. The surgeons have advised her that she can have a maximum of 2 pregnancies in total. And at that point, they would then look at what to do next for her. So it was a really lovely article that had come across. And just to give you some general stats around this, so over 15,000 women of childbearing age in this country have something known as absolute uterine factor infertility. So that could be that they are either born without a womb or have had a hysterectomy, for example, due to cancer or other abnormalities of the womb. And Womb Transplant UK have stated that over 500 women have now contacted the charity to take part in the programme. And already a dozen of those have embryos in storage or undergoing fertility treatment, which is a prerequisite essentially to getting onto the waiting list to have this transplant. So a lovely story. It's lovely to see that this has taken place in the UK or England for the first time.
It's amazing. I mean, all of you brought very nice human stories and very lovely stories. And this was really a breakthrough, Krupa. It's pretty amazing. Never heard of it. And maybe just for the quick fire of weird ones that I always try to do at the end, let me just start with another major breakthrough as well. Did you know that people speak at a normal rate of about 62 words per minute? I know, Keith, for you, that might be double, but But yeah, that's pretty much the speed at which we speak. So why do I tell this fact? Is because that there's a person with ALS who actually can no longer use the muscles of her lips, tongue, larynx, jaws. And because of that, she lost her ability to speak. But she was able to speak again. What was a major breakthrough, you think? Have a guess.
I think I know the answer to this one. Well, maybe I don't actually. Is the breakthrough computer-brain interface of some description?
It's exactly that, yeah. So she got a chip implanted in her brain at some sort of sensors, and she was able to communicate directly with the computer. It's a brain-computer interface, as they call it. And she was able to, by just thinking of the words she wanted to say, it came on the computer screen, which is a major breakthrough, if you will. Good. That's 1 point for you, Keith. Thanks for that. Another question. And we have a primarily male-dominant audience today, or panel today, but audience we don't know, but definitely panel. So here's my question. Who is more complex to understand, men or women? Krupa, I'll start with you.
I'd say women.
Okay. Mo will be very. Go ahead.
I think men.
No, obviously women have a number of fluctuations, for example, in their hormones throughout the month, and therefore their emotions may be different, and therefore they're not consistent and could be more difficult to understand and read and figure out what may be going on, even for them. So maybe we're more mystical creatures. I'm not sure.
Interesting.
I have a feeling you're going to say men are, though.
Keith, what do you think?
Well, it depends who you're asking, of course. If you ask men, they may say women. If you ask women, they may say men. I mean, but I'll try and put some justification behind why I think women are maybe more complex because of their, broadly speaking, higher emotional intelligence and sorts of more richly complex interpersonal interactions, which for, more bread and butter kind of unreconstructed Scottish men like me sometimes seems a little bit complex. So I'd give some justification behind it. I think it's women for those reasons.
Well, it's all good and well. Obviously, it was a little bit of a trick question. The reason why I asked this is because the human Y chromosome, the determinant of the sex male, has finally been completely sequenced. And I mean, it might be sounding confusing because the Human Genome Project, remember, announced about 22 years ago, I guess. It already said that it had fully sequenced the human DNA, but that was not really the case because the X and Y chromosome, which is the sex chromosomes actually specifically, they were still impossible to decipher with technology at the time. And so the X chromosome was already fully sequenced 3 years ago. The man chromosome only was able to be deciphered just very, very recently. So if we're talking about trying to understand man or humans fully, then apparently it's a little bit more complex to understand men fully. That was the trick question. Be careful with what you answer if I answer these questions. Third one, last one. It's about insulin release. Here we go. Researchers led by a certain person called Martin Fussenegger. I'm not quite sure if I pronounce it correctly, but he's working at the Biosystems Science and Engineering departments at ETH Zurich in Basel, which is in Switzerland. They are developing insulin-producing designer cells, and they can be implanted in the body. What is really special about those designer cells, you think?
If I might, so what's special about them? It's probably the source from where they've come from. So if they're designer cells, it's maybe come from some curious source, like some animal. No? All right, okay. So.
Somebody else? Mo, you got a hunch?
Maybe they are not human.
No, well, that's maybe one thing. I'm not quite sure. It probably derives from humans somehow. But Krupa, you want to take a guess?
No, I was simply going to say that they are probably from people where insulin is okay and whatnot, and they're helping people where they may have resistance or whatnot.
No, it's actually that these designer cells are receptive to sound waves. And so if you want to have insulin produced, you need to produce sound waves. And more specifically, they trigger it with music. And more specifically, it's a UK band, one of the biggest UK bands out there, or British bands, which is Queen. And so if you play We Will Rock You, then apparently those cells will start within a couple of minutes, start producing insulin. This is what they're working on.
I was going to say, I know someone who works in a tribute band, and so you would be a bit careful if you went and listened to it. You'd inadvertently have a hypo.
Yeah, maybe one thing, Chad.
I have heard of this. I was going to say there's a number of startups in the UK who are working on this in particular. neuroscience firms. So one which is on actually reducing pain, so menstrual cycle pain by using sound and music. And the other is related to migraines as well. And then I came across an article very recently on cancer wards who are using sound to help reduce levels of pain experienced by cancer patients following chemotherapy or any other therapy they may be going through. And it's proving to be quite successful. So, yeah, it's really, really interesting.
Timo, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, we owe Queen a lot because apparently, scientifically speaking, the song that is the best at making someone happy is Don't Stop Me Now. So, as far as scientifically proven, Don't Stop Me Now makes everyone happy in the fastest manner. So thank you, Freddie.
So basically, Don't Stop Me Now is the most healthusiastic sound in the world. Well, thank you guys for these healthusiasms. It is a healthusiasm world indeed. But now time for something else. In this healthusiasm world, we see the boundaries of industries blurring between the worlds of healthcare, wellness, and consumer business. You can see how consumer businesses are slowly moving into wellness and healthcare space, while the healthcare industry is paying more attention to what is happening outside of their own industry. Which brings the following question: what behavior, innovation, or trends from one industry can be worthwhile for another industry? In other words, what should we bring inside out or outside in? Tell me, Krupa, what's the idea, the innovation or evolution that you would consider bringing inside out or outside in?
So I came across an article all centered on the vagus nerve, and in particular, the vagus nerve stimulation or stimulator. So the vagus nerve can sometimes be known as the second brain. The term vagus, obviously it's not Las Vegas, but vagus is actually Latin and means wondering. But the vagus nerve actually is a pair of nerves that serve as a two-way communication channel between the brain and the heart, the lungs, the abdominal organs, and many, many more structures. And the scientific interest in this area is actually becoming increasingly more interesting, but also increasingly growing. You see nutritionists, for example, talking about how what you eat, for example, could affect your brain and therefore performance, and so much more. There's more treatment, for example, for treating obesity to depression as well. And there's also, if you go and search for vagus nerve hacks on social media, what you'll find is there's over 138 million views of this particular topic on TikTok alone. So how do we stimulate the vagus nerve? Well, first of all, as I've just mentioned, it can be used to treat a number of conditions such as epilepsy and depression, heart disease. And that's recent research that was released by the NHS. And they can actually help with an array of areas. So a stimulator may help people who are obese by telling the brain when the stomach is full. It could reduce stress and heal digestive issues. And research also has shown that it could help regulate blood pressure and or lower blood sugar as well. And research is also being conducted at the moment into the vagus nerve and inflammation, and in particular into Parkinson's. So there's a number of ways you can stimulate the vagus nerve. It could be done through a device, or it could be done through breathing techniques and other methods, which I'll go into shortly. But one way that's been talked about is a device that produces electrical impulses and stimulates the nerves. And this is actually placed into a patient's neck, because obviously it's quite easily accessible. And what it will do is it will provide regular bursts of stimulation. And then there are different frequencies that will either block or activate certain nerve fibers. So if this is one method that you would like to go down, obviously this is a surgical procedure that you have to insert this little device, or what's more commonly or very well known at the moment is the Wim Hof method, for example, as well. So people can stimulate the vagus nerve themselves by immersing themselves in cold water. Also yoga and breathing techniques that are well known with yoga, which can also help stimulate the vagus nerve as well. So what I have brought today this is a little explanation of several articles that I've looked at, is what do we think about this and stimulating the vagus nerve? Do we think it's got an application to health? Obviously, the research is there. And do we think that this could benefit people going forward? I will go to Keith to start with.
Thank you. It's such an interesting area, a sort of renewed interest in the vagus nerve. And you've given a really great introduction to this as well. The vagus nerve performs a really important role as part of the autonomic nervous system, that unconscious kind of wiring that works on the operating system of the body. It combines the sympathetic, which is the sort of fight or flight type things, the sort of more stimulating side of things. And then the parasympathetic, which dominates the vagus, which is the rest and digest. It branches all the way through the body and controls lots of different areas. I'm more used to addressing issues with the vagus nerve as a doctor when things go wrong with it. Typically, people can have autonomic problems with diabetes and so on. So it's something that we're more used to sort of addressing when things are going wrong. And then pharmacologically, when people take medication, it drives the autonomic nervous system. Anything that raises a person's understanding about this is great because, of course, the parasympathetic nervous system predominates when you're approaching a state of rest or relaxation. And we all know exactly how impactful stress is on poor health. So I think people becoming more understanding of it is very helpful. You've said there's different ways, physical methods of doing it, mindfulness, meditation, yoga, cold water immersion, exercise, time with friends and family, relaxation and so on, all helpful. And then the bit that was really interesting was about how there's a connection between the brain and this nerve and the immune system as well. So the reduction of inflammation, I was aware of a company called Galvani, and Galvani do a bioelectronics. They're funded by GSK and Verily, if you remember Verily from the Google Health side of things. They've been still investigating this for a while, and they have an implantable device that is looking at reducing inflammation in rheumatoid arthritis, a condition that causes joint pain and inflammation for many people. And because it's a lifelong condition with drugs that could be quite potent, it's really exciting to find how, stimulation, electronic or bioelectronic medicine can be helpful here. And there's lots of other areas too, but it was really interesting to see that. And as a final point before I hand over, my wife, who's an opera singer and voice massage therapist, is obsessed with the vagus nerve and spends a lot of time with her clients, helping them tap into those things that will help calm the nervous system. So, yeah, we're shortly going to have a diagram of a vagus nerve on the wall of our house, believe it or not.
Yeah, definitely. Singing has well been known and lots of research around it to help actually reduce stress and calm people. So, yeah, thank you for that. Mo, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's interesting because what you said is it plays a role. And when you say it plays a role, it means that it's part of a bigger picture, right? And if you look up the vagus nerve, you see it plays a role in mental health, in gut-brain axis, in heart health, in inflammation, as Keith said, in epilepsy, in biofeedback. Also could play a role in autism and development disorders, sleep, chronic pain. But the key word is plays a role. And the status quo of how we're taught to think about health is overly linear. We learn to break down complex problems into manageable chunks and see issues in isolation of their root. Because the vagus nerve, something happens before and something happens after that, right? And with more data being available, we are kind of losing that meta view on health. So rather than deep dive into the vagal nerve, we should backtrack from the nerve and look for something essential. I don't know if you know Zach Bush, MD. You probably do. So Zach Bush is talking about connective health, right? He looks at the ecosystem. He says that all the research we did in trying to isolate cells and see if we expose them to certain triggers didn't predict what the cell would do in an ecosystem, right? So I love that ecosystem thinking, and I would love for science to be more into analyzing the ecosystem around the vagal nerve and trying to go from treatment to healing. Because you could treat all these individual things, but I think if we look at the meta approach of health, we would be able to heal things because treating is unsustainable. So I'd love to see, first of all, the vagus nerve and everything we know about the vagus nerve to give way to a new type of science that looks at the meta system of how it kind of influences everything else, all these dominoes that are connected to the vagal nerve. And I would like to warn people, not to go into that life hack. We see a lot of how do you stimulate, how do you overstimulate and things like that. And think of the vagus nerve as something that is the life hack for everything else, because that will make people desperate and tired of looking for new solutions.
I also think it's important to mention that a lot of the people that try and stimulate the vagus nerve will be around about the carotid body, which is in the neck. It is important to say that actually directly stimulating that, manually stimulating, can in some people actually be harmful. It can cause profound reduction in heart rate and fainting and so on. So it's something that you don't want to just do lightly. That's not to say that it can't be done safely in some circumstances, but I don't want people going around crunching and rubbing on their neck willy-nilly.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you both. Mo, what you say, the word that I picked up on in particular is the word role. And you're so right. We often just think about a treatment in Western healthcare rather than looking at the, as you say, the ecosystem or the holistic picture, which is where Eastern practices look at. For example, they look at the body as a whole. And to treat the body, you need to look at not just the body, but the mind as well. And to now, we haven't really connected both together, but we do see this integration starting to happen. It's slow. But yeah, the more we comment on, or we continue to focus on treatment, prevention is where we always need to be focusing. The interesting thing is that people can actually go and buy from Amazon, for example, a vagus nerve stimulator. So it's exploding online. People can go and buy these devices, but still, it's about treating the whole and not just thinking about one aspect.
Yeah.
Sorry, you were going to say, Mo.
Right. Zach Bush once again said, he has a clinic and he says, we are treating people with diabetes that have done everything by the book and it doesn't work. Why? Because at the basis, they're anxious. So all therapies do not work because that vagal nerve in itself does not allow them to lower their insulin level, to lose weight. Try and work out while you're stressed, you won't lose weight. Try and look at your dietary habits and you're stressed, you won't lose weight. So I think that's an interesting part. Anxiety is at the basis of everything else, of all therapy. And, so I think that kind of makes sense that if we can look at it from a holistic point of view, all these therapies will have better outcomes.
And I'll in strong agreement on that one, whether it's conventional Western medicine or alternative medicines or medicines from the East, a move towards a more holistic biopsychosocial approach, the biological that we often reduce things to, the psychological, the mental and emotional state of those that are experiencing these issues, and social. We're social beings. We interact around us. We talked earlier on about the role of one cell versus a cell in a group. Humans are the same. We interact around us. We have pathways in our brain that are specifically designed to reflect those around us. We focus too closely on single solutions at our peril. It can be very tempting, though. I understand that. But yeah, I'm 100% behind you on this one. And there's a real growth in integrative and functional medicine as a result.
Thank you. We'll talk about this for ages. Christoph, we'll bring you in now to get your point of view.
Yeah, well, what can I add to this discussion already? The thing is that indeed, from what you read from it about it, is that it plays, and Mo mentioned it before, it plays into a lot of domains. There's a lot of solutions out there. They might be harmful if not used properly. And I think the point of view that I'd like to bring up here is, Krupa, you mentioned that there was 138 million views for the vagus nerve hack on TikTok. I looked it up yesterday. It's already 150 million. So it's growing massively. And just to give you a little bit of perspective on how big 150 million is, last month we talked about Barbiecore. So it is another trend on TikTok. Barbie is probably the most popular toy doll out there. It's one of the most popular movies in recent years. And Barbiecore as a trend has 900 million views. So the vagus nerve has 150, which is only 1/6 of Barbiecore. So this is how big it is. And if you go on Instagram, you see similar things, similar numbers. On YouTube, you have videos on the vagus nerve which reach 6 million people. And the thing is, Pete mentioned harmfulness and single focus as well, as mentioned by Mo. I think there's a lot of dangers in the popularity of these platforms that quickly can disseminate a lot of information. I mean, we saw it during COVID, where a lot of medical misinformation caused a lot of, confusion, mistrust, harm, even perhaps. It could even undermine public health efforts and so forth. Actually, during COVID, we were more actually battling the infodemic maybe than the actual epidemic. And that's not me saying, that's the Director General of the WHO, can't remember his name, that said it back in the days. So there's a big danger around it, even if it might work quite a bit. But the thing is that there's also a lot of opportunities. And I think that if we're talking inside out, outside in, there's maybe not a lot of, we within healthcare, we don't always look at these opportunities sufficiently enough. And how can we spread information a lot more? We talked about medfluencers in previous podcasts, medical influencers, social media to counterbalance the bad information or the misinformation out there. We talked about YouTube Health being a separate YouTube specifically dedicated to making high quality health information accessible. And they're partnering with, New England Journal of Medicine, Cleveland Clinic School, Johns Hopkins, American Heart Association, all those kind of organizations, just to make sure that on these popular platforms, there is valuable health information. And I think this is something, if I was thinking about the vagus nerve and how it is exploding on these social media platforms, I think this is something that we in healthcare, we need to work on. And I think it was Aline last time that told me something, or that was texting me something specifically. She mentioned the YouTube Health Accelerator Programme. And I think that was a very good example to bring up here. Because what is it? It's actually a program where healthcare professionals are trained during 10 weeks. It's a boot camp, some sort of thing, to optimize their social media channels, to optimize their content. And it's in partnership with the World Health Summit, which is happening in October in Berlin somewhere. So the World Health Summit, for those who don't know, it's actually a global health association and collaboration. They're bringing all together these stakeholders from all around the world to foster global health that is guided by science. And so in the margin of this World Health Summit, there's this YouTube Health Accelerator Programme. And I really like that idea, also thinking about these vagus nerve, because they are helping doctors, nurses, psychologists, or any type of healthcare organization out there to be more successful as a creator on YouTube, to reach with the right information more people, to have a bigger impact, to master the content, to build audience, to maybe even generate revenues, if that would be a thing for them. But the thing is that I wanted to bring up is that vagus nerve is huge. There's a lot of hacks. As Keith was saying, it might be dangerous. And so we in healthcare has an obligation maybe to make sure that we are present on those platforms, to make sure that there's not 150 million, but maybe even 300 million. And that the other 150 million is definitely science-based or science-backed, at least, because that is what Healthusiasm is all about. I think we should try to not focus on the downsides of what social media could do and try to regulate all the negative things or potentially negative or harmful things that are out there. But we should rather focus on what we could do on those platforms and maybe even share some positive things and some science-backed information on the vagus nerves as well, because that might be way stronger. So that was my take on the vagus nerve. It's a little bit off-road here, but I had the feeling that when I was looking at it, it was like, whoa, this can go either ways. Indeed, single focus, harmful. And we need to have people on these social media platforms to counterbalance and put the right information out there.
I'll just want to add one thing. The human drive is to look for a life hack, which is easy, convenient. And popularity and usefulness on social media might not be the same because our human drive is to look for something that is simple. So I think if YouTube is helping people make content and the content is nuanced, I'm not sure it will be popular. So that's the human behavior there in looking for life hacks and things that are easy, right? Because it's a complex world and things are more complex. So that's a challenge. Is popular useful? And do we integrate the nature of human beings to look for shortcuts?
Well, what I wanted to convey was more positivity around that topic. I think that it is possible. I do agree with you that life hacks are simple and easy, but there are things to be done. I don't believe there's nothing to be done. We need to be realistic, but we need to be optimistic at the same time, trying to actually reach those people.
Totally agree. And then we need to entertain people on health rather than inform them. Health entertainment, we had the topic there. That might be a good one.
Exactly. Well, thank you for that discussion. Let's move to the next segment of the Healthusiasm podcast. Is it something, nothing, or everything? Every month, month, one of the panelists brings an idea, an innovation, or an evolution forward that sparked their healthusiasm. And the rest of the panel will then debate and share their opinion about it. Do they find it something, nothing, or everything? And this month, I'll be talking about voice tech. Think about it. Voice is probably the most natural and fundamental way to communicate effectively. Now, imagine if we would use technology with our voice, how much will this actually change our lives? Maybe even radically improve our lives. And what we've seen with voice technology is that it has shifted from pure, straightforward voice commands to becoming real complex networks of interaction, actually. Look at how Amazon Echo, Apple Siri, Microsoft Cortana, Google Home, and even just simply the Google search have come a long way from only providing answers or some sort of entertainment system that is perhaps commanded by your voice to becoming really an alternative user interface to interact with, to get things done like making shopping lists, making mental notes, recording appointments, text writing, or simply looking up information. And it has been realized by the improvement in a couple of technologies. First of all, there's the automated speech recognition. So we recognize speech. There's a text-to-speech technology, which allows you to actually change what has been written to speech. And there's also the increased understanding of natural languages. And so all of these technologies that have radically improved in recent years, they allow us to put forward a lot of applications. And it will, in my opinion, play a huge role in defining how we communicate with our loved ones. And maybe, or most likely, in my opinion, even in healthcare as well. Because think about it, what voice actually could do, and you'll quickly understand that it can become the competitive battleground in what I call healthcare's digital transformation. Because it could improve productivity for healthcare professionals. It could improve the quality of the patient experience. It could improve life for specific populations, elderly, disabled people. It could improve clinical research, could improve training. Let me just quickly give you some examples. How voice tech is the next, or why voice tech is actually the next digital frontier in healthcare. First of all, it can document. We talked about it numerous times on the podcast as well. You can dictate notes that are automatically transcribed into the electronic health record. DeepScribe from Amazon, Nuance from Microsoft. We talked about it here. But it can also, voice tech can also help you to execute orders. Control devices, making calls, sending messages, setting up a schedule, canceling appointments. Physicians can use it to do some prescriptions, order diagnostic tests. Surgeons can even use it to control medical equipment, view images, retrieve patient data while being in the operation center. Third of all, it could, of course, provide information or instructions as well. Because patients, they can be reminded to take their medications. They could be explained what the side effects are of medication. Maybe the voice tech could answer the questions that patients might have related to their medication. It could also help to monitor patients or even post-surgical recovery. And in that area, you could also use voice tech where symptoms might be checked and reported back to healthcares. Health insurance companies could use it to answer questions. Physicians could use it to receive or provide instructions. And we can have an immediate real-time translation as well when we are talking to people that do not speak our language. So documentation, executing orders, providing information or instructions, all of this could be a radical improvement, I think, for healthcare. And that's why I believe that if I would ask myself, is it something enough for everything? I would say this is everything. Voice tech is really everything. But I'd love to hear the opinion of Keith, of course. What do you think? Is voice tech something, nothing, or everything?
Well, I'm going to start by saying that I think it is definitely closer to everything than nothing. That's for sure. Our voice is a critically important part of how we interact with other people, but also how we define ourselves. So everything you've just said is right. We use voice as a principal means by which we communicate, thoughts, ideas, instruction, and so on. And therefore, in healthcare, as with anywhere, the ability for machines to understand what we're saying and interact with us in that way, I think is remarkably positive. We learn to speak before we learn to write. We learn to speak before we do other things. We have an enormous part of our brain is dedicated to this as well. So I think it's very, very important. And you're right, there's been a lot of incredible developments with ambient documentation. The ones that you mentioned, I'm aware of one called Nabla, which is a Chrome plugin based out of France that does incredibly impressive things in transcription, but also summarization, making my job as a doctor much, much easier. But also, yesterday I saw a demo from a company called Tortus, Tortus, with the founders Dom Pimenta and Chris Tan. And that's incredible. I saw operating. It's a voice assistant that sits on top of the EHR and not only does the transcription, but basically navigates and uses the EHR directly for you. So you don't even need to know how to use the EHR, the computer system by which you record notes. It does it for you. So I think it's a very, very important area. But also remember that the voice tech is also not just about the words that you say, but how you say it. And that's important because voice can be used as a signal for detecting illness. As a doctor, we're taught about to listen to the changes in the voice for people in Parkinson's disease, for example, developing a tremor. People's voices change markedly with mental health issues. They've also yesterday reading about people using it as a signal to detect the onset of Alzheimer's as well. So as a rich source of data and also health, person's unwell. You got a laryngitis. You hear it first, And then it's also about how you define yourself. And when at eSanté, I met a cappella work on voice banking. And this is important because people with motor neuron disease or ALS, if they need a voice synthesizer, instead of having something like Stephen Hawking's, which is very mechanical, you can have recordings of your voice and speak with your own voice. And I would ask all of the listeners to reflect on the last time that you lost your voice and remember how that made you feel. How disempowered, how little of yourself you felt. This is how important the voice is. And so, yes, I think it's very much closer to everything than something or nothing.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. And indeed, I was talking about documentation, executing orders and providing information, for example. But as you rightfully said, I think voice technology, truth potential lies beyond documentation and these three things, right? When it would become an intelligent decision supporting tool, that can, based on clinical indicators, can help a physician in making decisions. That is really where we're heading and what the big potential is. You mentioned Parkinson's, the pitch changes indeed. Apparently, if you have coronary artery disease, your cadence of the voice changes. There's a lot of muscle decline diseases that you can hear through the voice. When somebody is depressed, the way that they express themselves, the hesitancy, the pauses in their speech could be, you can pick that up also with the voice. COVID, there was a lot of startups that were working on voice and coughing that you could that would allow you to detect COVID. So I really think, the next big thing, and that's why it will be huge in digital transformation in healthcare, is when it becomes a clinical decision support tool. That is one thing. The other thing, and then for that I'd like to go to Mo perhaps as well, is perhaps what about companionship? What if voice AI and voice technology would allow you to have a great relationship with somebody, and maybe that helps you with, I don't know, it could be therapeutic chatbots, can help you with guided meditations, coping mechanisms, maybe just general mental health support, maybe some romantic relationships, maybe for elderly, just some general companionship, friendliness, for example. Voice tech, is it something not for everything according to you?
I think it's huge. I think it's really huge because when your partner picks up the phone, you immediately hear how he or she is doing. We're completely attuned to voice. It's also the first thing we're able to communicate with our mother, apart from smell, of course. I think it's really huge. And if you look at the popularity of the sleep apps, they just use voice to make people less anxious, to help them sleep. So what I really love about technology is that it's able to scale something that is really scarce from a human point of view. And what is scarce? It's time and attention. So I really love the way, as Keith said, that it will have incredible opportunities in diagnostic, in early detection. But I think it's also really interesting in terms of inclusion. We are living in a more and more multicultural society where people do not always master language. These people who do not speak the language will be able to be serviced in the same way, where language will not be a barrier anymore. And companionship and compliance. A friend of mine, Bart Stevens, has a startup which is called Questions.ai, and they use the synthesized voice of the physician to send reminders to patients, because patients are more compliant when they hear their doctor. So he uses it also in helping people, be more compliant in clinical trials. But where I really love it, and we talked about that, Keith, is where it can enhance the patient-healthcare professional relationship, where voice is another person in the room and that is analyzing what is happening between the patient and the doctor and gives triggers or tweaks to the doctor to help him or her see things that do not appear from the words. And that's the difference between treatment and care. So if we're able to prompt doctors in the fact that in a very small time span, we get more input, not only from a semantic point of view, but also from a condition point of view, but also from an emotional point of view, we will be able to transform treatment into care and see and really hear the patient. So I love the fact that, this is a podcast. We're able to mobilize 10,000 people a month just by our voice. And the fact that they listen is not only because what we say is interesting, because we're having fun. So I think it's huge. And I think if we use it elegantly, and that's what I love about what Gary Vaynerchuk says, is the magic will be, where do we need human interaction and where can we enhance and elevate things with technology, right? And if we use it elegantly, and that's what I'm a bit afraid of, is that if it's good, it will be scaled and it will drive human interaction away. Let's look at triage, for instance, right? If people would just be recorded and we know what they have, what their condition is, we would be able to know how urgent it is and we'll be able to have a kind of pre-triage happening. But then they still need to talk to someone to see if it's, if it matches. I think knowing the lazy nature of human beings, and we take just the analysis of the voice technology for granted, we might look over a lot of things in terms of healthcare. Keith, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, no, these are all really good points. I suppose we're all coming across very enthusiastic, rightly so. But a couple of things to say. I mean, the first is going off the triage side of things. You're right. Bear in mind that and actually clinically, I worked in urgent and unscheduled care for almost all of my career. And so I've done a lot of triaging people over the phone. And it's not only just about collecting the information, because I worked on the symptom checker at Babylon, all these sorts of things. But think about how you feel if you feel unwell and scared and unsure, and you want to find out what to do, right? Part of it is finding out what to do. But a big part is that someone at the other end says, hello, I am a doctor or whoever. I am caring and listening to you, and I know things. A person's anxiety level comes down purely by how the voice is used, how they speak. And you can have two situations with exactly the same presentation. It can make the difference between a person taking some advice and staying at home, not needing healthcare, or getting panicky and I'm just going to go to the emergency department. So Christophe and Mo, you were talking about the use of the doctor's voice to be able to convey that. Maybe that's helpful. But then we stray into the ethics and permission as well. Is it ethical and moral to do so in a way that is transparent, as in this is an artificial, this is a machine. It sounds like your doctor, but it's a machine. Is it still going to be effective in that situation? So I think there's lots of really interesting stuff for many more podcasts to talk about here. And the other thing that I wanted to say is that whilst voices are very important for many people, there's actually a large number of people that can't use voice, either can't use voice because they're aphasic or they have a problem, or they can't hear it because they're deaf. So if we do move towards voice interfaces, remember, we still cannot reduce accessibility for those that can't use that too. So I think we always have to bear that in mind.
Just one last point. I don't want to leave Christophe hanging. He was talking about relationships and companionship. I think, maybe relationships are overrated. That's kind of an article I saw this month about AI companionship and AI chatbots that are competing with real human interaction. I think we have enough material to fill another podcast on that. But from what I hear, it's not doing great things for women's rights and violence towards women. So we'll talk about that later. But I think companionship, especially with elderly people, if they could hear voices of people they lost or anything else, I think it could help reduce isolation. The counterclockwise experiment by Ellen Langer, just hearing music and voices of singers that were having hits while you were young does tremendous things for people's health. So, anyway, I'll wrap it up here. I think it's huge.
Yeah, I think so too. And well, maybe we're not exactly at the point yet where it will have a major impact today on healthcare, although I see a lot of things happening for sure. I think tomorrow it will be massive. And Keith, you mentioned the electronic health record that is automatically filled in, completed by just listening and then playing some advice back to you would be huge, because no physician actually uses his electronic health record fully or to the full of its capabilities, because there's so much in that electronic health record that you can't, it's very hard to get it out there. I think there as well, voice could play, AI in general, but voice could play a big role. Also on companionship and perhaps the impact that voice could have on humans. I think Mo said it once, I think we shouldn't be underestimating that technology might have a bigger impact on decreasing the anxiety of people than actual humans. We've already seen it in plenty of research where if people want to talk about something very delicate and they rather want to talk to a digital human or to a bot because there's no judgment, because they feel more at ease. And the same way could be if there's a no judgmental voice that is talking to you, then probably it could decrease your anxiety as well. And I want you to think, and I'll close up with these words. I want you to think about this voice. If you think about voice assistants, the first thing that came to mind for me was GPS, right? The voice in your car that tells you where to drive. If we think about 5 to 6, maybe 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago, if there was this voice telling me to go left, but I wasn't 100% sure, I probably might go right 10 years ago, because I was kind of convinced that maybe the AI behind it is not, on point yet. And the voice was not giving me the instruction that really felt convincing to me, perhaps as well. Today, we very often just drive wherever we want to, based on the small voice telling us, go left, go right. And by the end, when we arrive at our destination, we don't even know where we've driven. And so to me, what we probably will see as well a little bit in healthcare is that voice, when it comes to a point that it's 99.9% correct, when it is so smart and helping us making decisions, that exactly the voice could be the next GPS, and that maybe that voice could be the GPS of healthcare in that regard. So that would be my 5 cents to wrap this podcast up for this month. I think we can still continue talking. I think there's a lot to be said. But thank you all for listening. If you like the show, don't forget to hit the subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform. By the way, you can also find us on the Shift Forward Health channel, which is a podcast channel of thought leaders who are actively designing and building the health and self-care business of tomorrow. Now, for now, I'd like to thank our own thought leaders for their insights and Healthusiasm. Thank you, Krupa Sutar, Mozuina, and Dr. Keith Grimes. My name is Christophe Choquet. We are the Healthusiasm panel, and we'd love to see you again next month for some more Healthusiasm. Ciao.